just giving you some information about a strong bone. And then the one on the right is, you can see that it's already deteriorated. We're building up our bones until age about 18 or 19. We thought it was 30, 35, but now we know that it's earlier on. So we really need to make sure we're getting enough dairy products as we move forward. Calcium is important for muscle function, also for nerve transmission. Calcium is involved with a lot of the intercellular and hormone secretion, communication between blood vessels and the rest of your body. 99% of our calcium is stored in bones, though, and your body is going to grab that calcium out of your bones if you're not getting enough in your diet. So that's the reason why it's so important. So vitamin D is really helpful because it promotes the absorption of calcium. So we know a lot about vitamin D now that we didn't know before, and it can be a factor in causing chronic illness, but it is a big factor in calcium absorption. That's one reason I like to recommend cow's milk if you're able to tolerate it, just because it does have that calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, phosphorus for good calcium absorption. If you can't, we certainly have alternatives, which is nice. And now we have more alternatives than we've ever had before. So thank goodness for that. The vitamin D helps with muscle function because it helps with calcium, and it also helps fight bacteria and viruses. It also works in nerve communication in the brain. And so it's very important in the rest of our body functions as well. So how much calcium do we need? For an 18-year-old, you need about 1,000 milligrams a day. For a 51 to 70-year-old male, you need about the same. But for those of us females that are past 51, we need 1,200. So that's about 4 servings of dairy a day. And we're going to talk about what a serving size is. The vitamin G is listed there below, so that, like I said, kind of partners with the calcium absorption. So here it talks about the supplementation for vitamin D. If we hear that someone is interested in vitamin D supplementation as a dietitian, we can recommend about 2,000 milligrams a day safely. If you don't know if you're low or high in vitamin D, that's a good question for your primary care physician, and they can take your vitamin D blood levels and see where you are. If it's really below a certain level, then they may recommend taking 50,000 milligrams for the week, just to start to step up your vitamin D intake. So that's a very on a very individual basis. So what are the food sources of calcium? Today we're talking about dairy alternatives, so we're going to be talking about different kinds of milk, but you can see here that there are a lot of dairy sources that are listed. Usually an 8-ounce cup of dairy milk or cow's milk would have about 300 milligrams. So to reach that 1,000 milligrams, you're going to need about a little bit more than 3 servings a day. Most people are pretty surprised by that. And those that are over 51, then we're looking at about, like I mentioned, about 4 servings a day. Now, a serving of cheese is about 1.5 ounces. So a lot of people are using cheese throughout the day, and they don't realize that 1.5 ounces could be a serving size. So that's one way to get it. Certainly yogurt. I like the cottage cheese idea. It's really high in protein. We have to just be careful if we have a hypertension patient. It's a little higher in sodium, but normally it's easy to tolerate. It's lower in fat. You can get, I like the 1% because it still has a little bit of fat, so it helps with satiation. I feel like the fat-free doesn't really give you that satiation as much. So, so cottage cheese is a good idea. Low-fat mozzarella is another way to get cheese in a lower-fat version. We don't want to, there are some studies out there about saturated fat, but we still right now, the evidence-based information tells us not to overdo it with the saturated fats, which are found in the high-fat cheeses. So a low-fat cheese or even Swiss cheese would be a good idea. Those are both lower fat and good options. Eggnog is there as 1 cup. That's usually pretty high in fat. They have some lower fat versions. Evaporated milk, because the water is taken out, you don't need as much to get your calcium. Most people don't drink evaporated milk very often. And then pudding and macaroni and cheese also have dairy products, so that's another good option. Anybody have any questions about the calcium food sources? Okay, let's see.
Hi, I lost the slides on my screen. I pressed a button and the slides went away. Do you know how to get them back?
Okay.
I lost them as well.
All right, we have Ashley here. Thank you, Ashley.
I think I pressed something and they went away, but
Okay,
I can't get them back.
Mine went away as well.
Here we go.
Oh, there, I got the first one back now.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to take that. And you should be able to talk.
Here we go. Okay, everybody back in business?
Yeah, I'm on slide 5.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Virtual is lovely when everything's working, right? So thank you for being flexible. So let's go to the next. Let's see, I think we're on the next slide. Control. There we go. So some other food sources, and you can see these have 50 to 200 milligrams. So that's less than the dairy food sources, but they still are helpful. And if we have, you know, like we talked about earlier, if we have a milk protein allergy, then that's a great alternative. So almonds aren't too bad. We know that leafy greens, like collards, mustard, turnips, bok choy, spinach, those have some calcium. The absorption is a little bit less, so we have to make sure if we're using that as a source of calcium that we have a nice healthy serving of it. Oatmeal too has some calcium, so today I made some smoothie bowls that we're talking about, and I used a little granola with oats in it, so that's going to kind of boost up the calcium, so that's kind of nice to know too. So calcium supplementation. Calcium carbonate is the one that we usually recommend. It's less expensive, usually well absorbed. But calcium citrate, that is the one that if you have acid reflux or problems with GERD, that would be the one that would be better. Or you can take medication. Does anybody have any acid reflux concerns that affects their calcium absorption? Okay, sounds like we don't have to worry about that, which is great. Try to take the calcium supplement with a meal. That's better for absorption. So a lot of people don't realize that. I know I usually take it in the morning with breakfast, and I take it twice a day. And mine has the calcium and vitamin D together, so that way it's pretty easy. I take an additional vitamin D just because I need that for my bone health. Everybody's bone health is a little bit different, so something just to kind of keep in mind. We don't want to take calcium supplements with iron supplements. So, so that if you're taking both of those, you need some time in between. so that you can absorb that calcium.
Question.
Yeah, thank you.
In regards to the calcium, I'm just starting to take the calcium. Is it better to break up the calcium in one in the morning and one instead of taking all of it at one time? Does that make it easier on your stomach then?
That's a great question. And it is better to take them separate. You can only absorb about 500 or 600 milligrams at a time. So it's helpful to spread out the calcium throughout the day and have it twice a day. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So having that with your meal and spreading it out, that's a good question. Yeah. Yeah, it does make a difference. So 3 ways to get vitamin D. A lot of times we get this question, well, I walk outside and even in the wintertime, but the problem is that you need to have a lot of your skin exposed in order for you to get enough vitamin D to make enough for what your body needs. And in the Chicago area, unfortunately, we don't run around in shorts for many months of the year. So, so that's something to keep in mind, that we're probably not getting as much. It's still helpful to go outside and get some of those sun rays. And if you can, even doing it in the middle of the day, that's really helpful. But you want to make sure that you're getting vitamin D and checking on that just to make sure that you're all okay. So you can get vitamin D from fatty fish. And as many of you probably know, if you've attended some of our other classes, we talk about salmon being part of the anti-inflammatory list and also part of the Mediterranean diet and lifestyle. So the Mediterranean diet is more chicken and fish, more fruits and vegetables, low-fat dairy, as I talked about earlier, and then also whole grains in moderation. Eating the healthy fats like olive oil, avocado, peanut butter, not overdoing it, but having those healthy fats. So that's really important. So those are really good to incorporate, and they help with our vitamin D as well. So some yogurt and milks are fortified with vitamin D, and some of the dairy alternatives are also fortified. So that's good. We know that we're getting that calcium and vitamin D, and they've helped us out by supplementing with that. So some individuals may need extra, seniors, breastfed infants, people with darker skin, medical conditions such as celiac or cystic fibrosis or Crohn's. So those are all situations where you're working with your primary care physician and you are kind of seeing where you are and getting their recommendations for how much you need. So the food sources, we kind of talked about this a little bit. Not many of us are taking cod liver oil, but that's one of the reasons they probably did it way back when. Mushrooms, there's the fatty fish on there, the swordfish, the salmon, canned tuna. Canned tuna, we usually recommend the white tuna, but not the albacore tuna. The albacore tuna has a little bit of an increased mercury risk. So I know a lot of people like that because it's a little flakier, but the white tuna would be a little bit better if you're eating it a lot and concerned about that. Milk, obviously, and then you can see here that the almond milk has about 100 IUs, and the fortified cow's milk has 120, so they're very close. One thing we are going to talk about in a minute, too, is that you check the label. So there's some almond milks. I have some information about general, but there are some that have different amounts, and they're changing them all the time. So they may have a certain amount of protein, they may have a certain amount of vitamin D or calcium. It's good to check the label and see where you are so you know where you're getting what. So if we're looking at food first for vitamin D, a couple of other options would be sardines. I know some people love sardines. It's not one of my favorites, but they are a good source of calcium too. Eggs, cereals. Sometimes cereals now are having both calcium and vitamin D, and also orange juice. So you can see that now where you can get a little bit of fortification in some orange juices. Any questions about that before we go into the milk alternatives? So on here, you can see, oh yeah, go ahead.
If you're estrogen positive, is the soy milk bad for you?
I love that question, and we have been doing some classes on soy, but we still get that question a lot. So for estrogen positive breast cancer, we recommend whole soy foods. Those are okay. So soy milk would be okay. However, if you have a food like sometimes it's in granola bars, we found it in Hormel chili. Not a lot of us are eating Hormel chili right now, but it is in some processed foods where they're trying to add in some protein, and it's an ingredient called soy protein isolate or soy isolate or soy protein. If it's an additive, that is what can increase tumor growth or risk of recurrence. So we wouldn't recommend that soy protein isolate, but soy, like a whole soy food like tofu or edamame or soy milk, those are all okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay,
I use
yeah.
it on my cereal because I don't like regular milk. It doesn't really agree with me for some reason. Although I can do Greek yogurt and cheese, but I can't do like milk. So I use soy milk on my cereal, and then I got to wondering about that. So
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And a lot of times with lactose intolerance, you can tolerate cheese or yogurt,
yeah,
but
I can.
can't tolerate milk or ice cream or cottage cheese.
Yeah, right.
So sometimes we'll recommend trying the lactate milk or the lactate pills if you're interested, but like we talked about, the alternatives are a good idea. And actually the soy milk does have more protein. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but really great question, Pam. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see this chat here too. She wants to know if you have any thoughts on cod liver oil capsules.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't see that. So there was another question about cod liver oil capsules. So I would say that would be a good question for your doctor. In treatment, we don't recommend them. But outside of treatment, that's a good question for your doctor just to see if he can look at all of your medications and see where you are. Normally, we try to suggest getting our nutrition from food. And so the current recommendation from the American Cancer Society is 3.5 ounces of fish twice a week. So I like that goal to kind of, I know it seemed like a while ago, my husband and I were trying to have fish more often, but we ended up having it about once a week. So we're really trying to push now to get more fish. I like tuna too, so I'm usually sneaking tuna in for my lunches, but it's good to get those healthy fats, those omega-3s, and so yeah, so that's a good question for your doctor. Any other questions? Didn't mean to rush through that. I love that you guys are asking questions. That's awesome. It's good to have that interaction. And then even though I'm just seeing your little circles, I know you're out there. So thank you. So there are several things to consider when you're looking at a milk alternative. And the first one is vitamins and minerals. The whole foods are absorbed better than fortified, but the fortified, like I said, still gives us an opportunity for getting good nutrition. Protein. So there can be from 1 to 8 grams of protein in some of the dairy alternatives. When we're looking at overall calorie needs and protein needs, for an 1,800 calorie diet, we usually suggest having 3 to 4 servings of dairy foods. Now, if you're getting like an 8-ounce cup of milk, that would be 8 grams of protein. So if you're skipping all dairy, then that's 24 grams of protein that you're not getting. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough protein. If we aren't getting it in our dairy alternative, then we might want to get it from something else or add in a protein, a plant-based protein, for example. Usually, and we'll talk more about this, but some of the oat and almond milks have 1 to 2 grams of protein, whereas the soy milk has 7 and dairy has about 8 per cup. So that's something to keep in mind. There are from 1 to 16 grams of added sugar in many of the alternatives. Now, the U.S. dietary guidelines say that we should look for a serving of food that's less than 6 grams of added sugar. So if they're up in that 16-gram range, we want to make sure the calories and the added sugar in the rest of our meals that day is much lower. So it doesn't mean you have to eliminate it, but we want to know where we're getting our calories, where we're getting our sugar, so that we can plan for that. And then the personal preference or digestive health, and we've talked about that already in our talk, really has made a big difference too. So people have different preferences based on that. There are some vegan sources out there, obviously, the oat milk or the almond milk, the soy milk. And so those are all things to consider, what you tolerate and what you don't. And if you have that milk allergy, like we talked about at the beginning, of casein and whey, or one or the other, then that's good that we have the plant-based options. So here's a little chart, and this is where I want to, this is for comparison's sake, but I do want to mention that it may be different when you look at certain labels. And I brought a couple of labels today for us to look at, but the labels, for example, the soy milk, usually I'm seeing 7 to 8 grams, so it might be a little bit less than that, but the almond milk, you can see the coconut, the cashew milk, the rice milk, those usually only have about 1 gram of protein. So sometimes we'll suggest adding, if you're a vegan or wanting to do all plant-based, you could add like a pea protein powder to your smoothie if you're making a smoothie, or you could have a different kind of protein with your breakfast. So just kind of, you know, being aware as to what we're getting and how much protein. Some of the fortification also can change with, the calcium absorption can change, as I mentioned, with fortification. So if you are choosing a dairy alternative because of flavor, you might want to see if you can fit in some other dairy products or some other things where you're getting that good calcium and vitamin D absorption. And if you're not able to tolerate it, yay, we have these options. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So let's talk a little bit about the, let's see if I can. All right, so I brought a couple of alternatives for us to talk about, and then we're going to talk about some recipes. The first alternative that I brought is this, let's see if I can hold it closer. There you go. It's a Chobani oat milk. And this one says...
I lost the screen again, unless that's not there. I don't know if someone hit something.
It's not there.
Yeah, we don't have the presentation anymore.
Oh, okay.
We just have the, just me. Can you see me okay?
Yes, you're small. I don't know how to get you large, but okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I don't know if you're going to go into this, like if one milk substitute like almond or oat or another one is better. Like one of the things I watch is carbs. So that has made me more stay away from oat milk versus like an almond milk. And, you know, I don't know like what your recommendations are, you know, if you're trying to maintain your weight and so forth.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I use the 1,800 calorie diet as a kind of a baseline. Most of us need either less or more than that, so we kind of know. So for an 1,800 calorie diet, we would say probably 6 servings of carbs a day, which would be about 15 grams of carbohydrate on the nutrition label. So on this one, for example, has 13 grams for a 1 cup serving. So this would be considered 1 cup. So if you don't want to have a lot of grams of carbohydrate, then you might want to consider watching the rest of your carbs, depending on how much calcium you need, but it's a good idea. Now, the other thing is that when you get so I picked, this one is the extra creamy, but they also have a vanilla one, which has a lot more carbohydrates. So there are a lot of flavored ones. They have added sugar. So that's what I like about the nutrition label, because we can kind of see. Some people might want that sweeter one for their coffee in the morning. That's okay, but we want to know it's in there so that we can, skip the cookie treat in the afternoon, or, have maybe a fruit for dessert instead of some other alternative. So that's a really good question. So these don't have quite as many carbs if you get the lower sugar one. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Or are you avoiding milk altogether?
No, I'm not avoiding milk. I use it in my coffee and kind of leave, use more than I need to get calcium, kind of make like a latte with my coffee. But I also watch my weight. So carbs is one of the things, but I didn't know if like one is healthier than the other, or, so forth.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I mean, it depends on what our goals are, right? We know we need calcium, and we are hoping to get protein. Now, a lot of people ask me about protein, and you can only absorb protein like every 3 hours, probably about 25 to 30 grams. So that being the case, we want to make sure that we're spreading out our protein foods throughout the day. So if we're breakfast is a big time where we're missing out on protein. And if we're having something that, like this oat milk, for example, has 2 grams of protein, and the almond milk that I'm going to talk about next has about 1 gram of protein. So in that case, we want to see if there's another way to get some protein at breakfast, maybe adding in a smoothie with a pea protein, or some other kind of yogurt. And there are yogurt alternatives out there, but we have to watch and make sure that we're not overdoing it with the sugar and added sugars in those as well. So, yeah. So protein is something that we want to kind of keep in mind throughout the day. So the almond milk, this is the next one that I brought, and I chose the lower sugar ones. So like I mentioned, so these are going to be a little bit lower. This one has 8 grams of carbs. So so that might be a better alternative for if you're really watching your carbs and you want to make sure that you're getting calcium and vitamin D supplementation. The oat one, before we leave that one, the extra creamy has a little bit more fat in it. So the fat content is 8 grams of fat, and let's see how many grams of saturated. It says 1 gram of saturated fat, but 8 grams of fat total. And then the oat milk, for example, has 2.5 grams of fat. So that's a lot less. I mean, the almond milk, sorry. So they are adding in some fat. There's some fat in the actual grain of the oat, but it's important to kind of say, okay, where am I getting this fat? They add some rapeseed oil to it. So that's probably where they can have the fat-soluble vitamins, because it has some vitamin D and vitamin A in there. So they're trying to make sure that that can stay stable in there so we can absorb it. I don't want to get too technical about everything, but we do want to look at the labels and just make sure that we're getting what we want. Does that make sense to everyone? The soy milk, and I used the soy milk today in part of my recipe, so I'll show you that one. But the soy milk has 4 grams of fat, so that's still a little bit lower than the oat milk. And there is obviously some fat in the soybeans, but it has 7 grams of protein, so that's kind of nice. for a 150-pound male, you probably need somewhere in the 60, 70, 80 grams of protein a day range. So if we're really trying to get our protein in, that means we need 10 to 15 at each meal time, and then maybe a couple of protein snacks or a smoothie or something like that. Over age 65, as I mentioned, we need even more protein. So that's something to keep in mind too. Where are we going to get all this protein, and how are we going to do it? So as far as carbohydrates, this one has 3 total carbs. So that's kind of nice. It's a little bit of a little bit less in carbs. It has 2 grams of dietary fiber, and the saturated fat, it says 0.5. So one thing we didn't talk about was calories, and the extra creamy oat milk has about 140 calories per cup. The oat milk has 80 grams of 80 calories rather per cup, and then the almond milk has about 60 calories. So you can tell the fat content has boosted up the calories in that oat milk. So so you can kind of see that those alternatives, that there are a lot of differences. What questions do you have about these so far?
I have a question. I don't
Yeah.
like the taste of the regular plain soy milk, although I know it's healthier, and I
Okay.
only use it on my cereal in the morning.
Okay.
So I switched to vanilla soy milk, which I know has a little bit more sugar in it,
Mm-hmm.
but I only use it on my cereal. That's all I use it on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if that's a really big deal because it has, you know, a little bit more sugar than it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Did you say soy milk? Vanilla soy milk?
Yeah, vanilla
Yeah.
soy milk. I use the silk, and I
Yeah.
tried the plain, and it's just icky to me. So I had to have a little flavor. And so, considering I really only use it in my cereal and nothing else, I thought, well, it can't be that horrible, but it does have, you know, a little bit more sugar, a little bit more, you know, of that in it. Yeah.
Well, and you know, what we recommend is having protein, fats, and carbs at each meal. So we need to have those categories in each of our meals. So it's good to have a little bit of fat, especially the healthy fats if we can, a little bit of carbs, a little bit of protein in all of our meals. So if you're having, sometimes when we're eliminating one of those, we're not feeling the satiety, or we're not getting energy from the carbs, or we're not able to sustain until the next meal if we're not getting protein. So, you know, everything in moderation is, I know that's a boring concept.
Yeah, it has the same like protein and it has the same everything, but has slightly more calories and slightly more sugar because of the vanilla in it, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Well, and I think, you know, that's great. What if you're going to a birthday party and maybe you want to have, you know, a different breakfast? Maybe you're having eggs that day where you're having less carbs for breakfast, and then in the evening you're going to, you know, have a treat for yourself. So I think it's okay to have moderation throughout the day, but know where your calories are coming from, know where your carbs are coming from, know where your protein is coming from, and your fat, so that you can make sure to kind of balance out the day.
Okay.
It's kind of like pizza. Pizza is okay. We just don't want to eat half a pizza. We want to eat a smaller portion where we have a couple of slices of pizza and a nice big salad with it. So, you know, you're kind of balancing out having the foods that you want, but also getting the nutrients that you need, and it still really tastes good. If you were to not have that vanilla milk and you would skip breakfast, I would be more concerned because you're not getting any protein at that early time. We know having 30 grams of protein at breakfast, which is a lot, and we don't all need that much, but we know there's some studies that show if we do that, that it helps with weight management. So that's kind of amazing. We want to kind of shoot for getting more at that time. And normally, if people start eating breakfast and add in protein at that early time, then they are noticing that they're not snacking in evenings and not eating bigger evening meals. So I think it's a trade-off, but that's a great question because we really need to balance. And that's why I think we have these classes to help you learn so that you know where you're getting your calories and your nutrients.
Yeah, and I think that's an issue with me because I've never been a breakfast person my entire life, even as a kid, you know. And so I'm trying to force myself to eat this cereal when I get up and stuff, you know, because we always were a family who, and I think most people, you know, dinner is your biggest meal, you know. So you're getting your calories more at the end of the day. And then if you have a snack in the evening, you know, and that's how I was raised. So it's very hard to switch it the other way, you know.
Yeah, and I think probably other people with us today would say the same thing, that we're the breakfast foods, for example, are not high in protein normally, the ones that most Americans are eating. So yeah, sneaking in that protein is really helpful. Any other questions? Or yeah, Pam?
No, that was good. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, that was a really good question. Any other questions on the ones that we talked about? So let's talk a little bit about the recipes that I made today. Um, the first recipe is related to breakfast, so that's what we've just been talking about. So that's awesome. And for those of you that are interested, we do have some additional smoothie recipes on the website, and they're easy to find online too. But today I made a couple of smoothie bowls. And that's where you're making a smoothie, putting it in a bowl, and then it's kind of like an art exhibition with having all these beautiful fruits. And the fresh fruits, I used berries today, but also some mandarin oranges and some kiwi. But the base of the smoothie is Greek yogurt. So this is regular dairy yogurt, but there are alternatives that you could substitute. Frozen fruits and frozen banana. The banana you can freeze yourself. And then you add a little bit of milk to it. So you can add whatever kind of yogurt you want and whatever kind of milk. So I used today the 5A yogurt cups. So they, let's see if you can see that, okay. This is 2%, and it does come in plain, which I really like. You don't have to worry about the extra carbs. I feel like we're still waiting for the perfect yogurt. You know, something with just a little bit of sweetness or fresh berries or something that's not too high in carbs. But this one is, it is a dairy product, but you can use a different kind if you want, a substitute, that would be fine. And then a little bit of milk and then the frozen berries. And so let me see if I can show you these. This one, I used blackberries, which is the highest fiber berry. It's about 7 grams of fiber per serving, and then raspberries, and then the little mandarin oranges. So there you can see the berries are in the actual smoothie. And then I kind of made a little rainbow, and you want to kind of make it beautiful so that when you wake up to it and you add in your beautiful colors, that you are excited about eating it. So that's the first one. And then before I move the camera, I'll show you the second one. So this one has even more colors. And you can see there I added some kiwi, which is really high in those anti-inflammatory properties and vitamin C. And then blackberries, raspberries. And in this one I added some granola. So the one I used was a Rick Bayless granola. And I like his. It's more natural. It's not always the cheapest one, but you want to not overdo it with super high in saturated fat and sugar with granola. So just being a little bit careful. But, waking up to this would be beautiful, I think. You kind of feel like you're at a restaurant. And you can decorate it. And if there are kids at home, they can help too and decorate that. So those are some good alternatives for making a smoothie, but putting them in a smoothie bowl so that they are a little bit more fun. And I'm a big proponent for having a beautiful placemat and maybe even having your orange juice or your smoothie in a pretty glass. But being a little bit mindful when you're eating, and even try to, maybe you're by a window or a plant, even that makes you relax a little bit. A lot of times we aren't taking times with meals, and then we don't understand if we're satiated or not. We don't know if we're hungry, if we're full. We're running out the door with a granola bar, which is better if that's all the time you have than skipping. But if possible, sometime during the week, try to take time for yourself and be mindful of what you're eating, and notice the flavors and the colors. And I'm really big into garnishes and making a beautiful setting. So I'm going to show you the soup. Anybody have any questions about the smoothie bowls? Do you think you would consider making that?
I had a quick question. What was with the yogurt again, or how did you prepare the yogurt piece of it?
So the yogurt, the whole thing went into the blender. So I took the Greek yogurt and the milk and the frozen berries and the frozen banana and put it all into the blender. So it took pretty much 2 seconds. And then I just washed the berries and kind of laid those on top as, the kind of the rainbow design.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Did everyone get the recipes emailed to them?
But it'll be on the website.
Oh, okay. They're going to be on the website if you did not get them yet.
I think I would try that smoothie bowl.
Good, right? Isn't that beautiful? And you can really use whatever you have in the fridge. So if you have, right now, it's apple season. Oh my gosh, chopping up some apples and doing a tiny bit of maple syrup with some peanuts, that would be delicious. I like using the granola too because it gives you a little bit more protein. It also gives you that good soluble fiber that's helpful for your heart, and also, helps keep us regular. So those are some other good things. But I think, you don't have to have a lot of fruit to make it beautiful. And you can use I use some canned because that's okay too. We're coming into the winter season where we might not have as much. I do encourage everyone to take advantage of the fall apple season. And apples do stay in your fridge for quite a while. You could probably, even for about a month. But you can also, slice them up and freeze them, and then they wouldn't have the exact same texture, but you could put them in your smoothie and you would get that lovely flavor. So that's something to keep in mind. And I didn't do anything complicated, but you could also add chia seeds or hemp seeds, or, that would give you some more protein as well. So I think all of those are good ideas. Does anybody else have any other smoothies that they make at home that are using some alternatives? Or even other breakfast ideas. For example, if you're using like a dairy alternative.
I use one of Dr. Oz's breakfast smoothies where it's like a tablespoon of lemon juice, and I do spinach, a tablespoon of almond butter, or you could use peanut butter, and milk. I usually use the almond milk, and it's very, and half a banana, and it's very good.
That sounds delicious. Yeah, that sounds great. I love that. And that's something we didn't really talk about, but what a great idea to use almond butter, peanut butter, or if you have a peanut allergy, sun butter. I love that as an alternative, and it tastes great. And it's so good in smoothies, or a lot of times I'll suggest to have peanut butter in your oatmeal. And some people look at me like I'm crazy, but it's a great way to get some more protein in. And if you were using almond milk or oat milk or something in your oatmeal, that would be another great way to get some protein and have an alternative. Yeah. Anybody else have any ideas?
Another good thing, you don't even taste the spinach.
Oh, spinach. Yeah, getting some greens in there. Love that. Yeah, a lot of times it's a good idea for kale too, because kale is so fibrous that it works really well in a blender. So yeah, that's a great idea.
That's what I was
For
just gonna say. I do one with berries, kale, banana, almond milk, and then like chia seeds or flax seeds. And my kids even eat them. I can sneak in the greens.
Your kids like them too. Isn't that awesome? And they're getting all those good nutrients in there. I love that. They might really like the smoothie bowls where you can decorate with. The kids love being creative in the kitchen, and where you can decorate it, and you know, it may look crazy to us, but it'll be beautiful to them.
Yeah. Well, they're older, but yes, it reminds me of acai bowls.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And you can do this with frozen fruit too. That's no problem. You can freeze bananas, but you can also use like frozen fruit in there. You don't have to use fresh. We still are at the tail end of the fresh fruit season, so we have a few in there that are left. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Robin.
So for a quick breakfast, like I don't always have time to deal with the blender, but I don't know, you were talking about the perfect yogurt. Have you heard of the Oikos 000?
I have, yeah, and I
Because
think
it has,
that's a good option for, especially for people that are managing weight. The only comment I would have about it is that it really has, since it's 000, it doesn't have a lot of fat, so sometimes you may not be as satiated from it. But if it keeps you full with having the protein, then I think that's great. And you know, there are, and I didn't mean to slam all yogurts. Certainly there are some good ones out there, and Siggy's is really high in protein. The Too Good or True Good, I think it's Too Good, True Good. That one is pretty good. It doesn't have as high in carbs and added sugar. So yeah, no, I love that. That's a good idea. Thank you, Robin.
yeah, and I just mix that over fresh fruit and then put a little of the Nature's Path organic heritage flakes for just a little crunch.
Yeah.
That you know, instead of granola, which is a little more caloric.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really good breakfast for anybody looking for something quick.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. I love that. Awesome. And you're getting the fruits, which have those anti-inflammatory properties, which we talk about in nutrition during survivorship, making sure that we're increasing those foods in our diet. Don't forget about adding a little cinnamon, because that's another anti-inflammatory that we can sneak in. I didn't do that today, but that would be great to sneak in. In fact, that goes well with the soup that I made today. So I'll show you this soup in the pot, and you can kind of see that it's pretty thick. And then the way I made this soup is using coconut milk as well as soy milk, because I thought, you know, it has a garnish of peanuts, or you could use pumpkin seeds if you have a nut allergy. And this is pumpkin season, so the pepitas or the pumpkin seeds, those would be great. And I do like to roast the nuts in a nonstick pan just briefly. It brings out all the yummy flavor. And but the soup itself is butternut squash and sweet potatoes, and so the coconut milk is where you're getting some protein, but the coconut milk is usually fairly low in protein. And the research is still showing that it's higher in saturated fat. So we wouldn't recommend it for all of your dairy products because of that. But I added in some soy milk, which will give it a little bit more protein and maybe a little yummy flavor, kind of a nutty flavor. And then the garnish is, I'll show you here how I kind of made a little setting with a table runner to keep in mind our mindfulness. The garnish that I used here, there we go, kind of, you can see the smoothie bowls. So this garnish has a little bit of red onion, and you know, I like red onion sometimes can be strong, so sometimes I will do a quick pickle where you can add, put it in vinegar for a minute or like about 5 minutes, and just a tiny bit of honey. You really don't even need the honey if you want. It kind of just takes the edge off of the red onion. And then it has red peppers, and you can see the peanuts. And then the garnish in the middle, you can use regular basil, but I am growing the purple basil at home. We have a little raised bed with this purple basil, and it's such a beautiful color, and it really, I think, adds a nice color to this dish, as well as flavor. So adding the peanuts, the red pepper for color, the purple red onion, and Thai basil makes it really delicious. And then it's got some good soy milk in it and some of those good fall vegetables. So so that's yummy. I squeezed a little bit of fresh lime on top, and I'm going to do that now. And so that'll give it a little bit of kick. You could even do a little bit of olive oil. It calls for red chilies, and I decided not to use the red chilies. Those can be really strong for some people, but you can pretty much garnish with it what you want. But I like the nuts for the crunch. We talked about crunch a little bit earlier, and I like the crunch too. And, you know, we're adding some protein, and we're adding some good plant-based fats. So all of that would be good. So this is going to be a nice warm soup for the coming months. We're just getting that chilly weather this week. So it's good to try some soups, and then, you know, adding in some of that protein if you can. So does anyone else have any other soups where you have like a milk additive to a soup? Or some other good soups that are, I guess the milk in there does give it protein, and the coconut milk gives it kind of a nice Thai flavor. This is kind of a Thai basil soup. So I have another one that I make that's a chicken corn chowder, and I use skim milk in that. So it still works. A lot of people think you can't use skim milk in your soups, but it will still thicken up. And so that's a good idea too. But you can use some of these dairy alternatives. The silk milk will work well. I substituted in, and it did great. So once you saute the onions with a Thai chili paste, then you add the carrots and saute those, and then you have the butternut squash and the sweet potatoes, and then I used an immersion blender. And you can kind of see in the picture, it looks really completely smooth, but I like a little texture, and I don't mind a little peel on my sweet potato. So you can kind of see that this has a little bit more texture than being completely smooth. I think that gives it a nice change. So our time is almost up. Do we have any questions? And did I answer the questions that you gave me at the beginning of our hour?
I have a question. I'm not sure it really related to everything you said, but it's a breakfasty question. I'm allergic to egg whites. So eggs is in almost everything, a regular breakfast thing. And in a lot of recipes, with the cancer, trying to recurrence, they use egg whites and things. And I don't do eggs. And so I have a lot of problems trying to figure out other things for breakfasts. I do oatmeal and, I do smoothie, things like that. But you kind of run out of things because you can't do eggs, and it's hard, so.
Yeah. I mean, there are some recipes out there, and I wanted to do a class on this before COVID, and we kind of closed down a little bit, but there are some savory muffins out there where you could, even use like a meat or a meat alternative, or have a muffin with peanut butter in it, peanut butter and oats, and that might be a good idea. There are certainly egg alternatives that you could use. And another idea is like a breakfast burrito. So you could use black beans and veggies, and if you can do cheese or a cheese alternative, that would be a great thing. Those are super easy to make in quantities and then throw them in your freezer individually wrapped in tin foil. And, you know, that's another way where you can keep those and pull them out. It's still savory, but it doesn't have any eggs in it, and you're getting some good plant-based protein. So
Okay,
that's an idea too.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Oh, another idea. Okay, you've gotten me started. Be like breakfast quesadillas. So you could do an applesauce, mozzarella cheese, and cinnamon, and then you make the quesadilla and slice it up and dip it in applesauce, giving good protein. It's perfect for applesauce season, and so delicious. It's not really a common idea, but it's so tasty.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions today? All right. Well, thank you so much. I know your time is precious, and I really appreciate you spending it with me today in this hour.